Hi everybody. As you may or may not know, the Curriculum and Assessment Review final report has been published, and I have had a quick read through it from a very specific history lens, and I am going to give you initial thoughts and ideas about it with some provocations on things we might want to think about. However, I want to make it absolutely clear that not a lot is going to change in the near future, if anything, and the developments I'm going to go through should not be just ham-fistedly put in, because that's not going to help anyone. Please see this as initial thoughts and ideas, and then start to think about next steps, refinements. But please remember, don't do anything quickly, as not a lot, if anything, is going to change in the near future. So let's take a look, and I will be using my post-it based notes, which are here, to guide me through the pages that I found interesting for the history specific lens. So on the screen you can obviously see the front cover page. I'm going to start here, the list of all recommendations. If you want a sense of the principles and what the recommended changes are likely to be, this is the place to go. It's page 180 of the PDF. Certain things that stand out: aspirational, engaging and demanding. That, I think, is a benchmark, because our young people do indeed deserve the best, irrespective of background. Absolutely fair. Knowledge rich is working. Also, let's be brutally honest here, schools have spent the past 5 years putting huge amounts of work and effort into this. So wholesale changing that would have been a disaster, and I'm very pleased to see it hasn't changed. Didn't expect it would. Supports young children and people to master core concepts. The absolute pivotal one for me is ensuring sufficient space for them to build their knowledge and deepen their understanding. More on that towards the end. Organisation. This one I find really interesting, because it does emphasise the importance of cross-curricular links, as we used to call them. However, some schools have gone for totally separate subjects, which misses out that important contextual background. Professional autonomy of teachers is maintained. That, I think, is going to stay. I would have been surprised if that had changed, because I think we can make the curriculum work for our children, our cohorts, our localities, and we know them better than any curriculum designer would ever do. And diversity and inclusion is absolutely front and centre as well. So in terms of that, do take a look. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the specific parts. So I'll just put in the pages I want to look at. You can see I've clumsily highlighted them in yellow. This one, no surprise, recommend the introduction of a new oracy framework to support good practice. So that's akin to the reading and writing frameworks. Magnificent. In order to write history, we need to get children to speak history often. Being able to speak clearly, eloquently, and from a basis of strength is a skill and that I think everybody should aspire to have, because it's universally relevant and important. For history, history has always been a written and an oral medium, so hand in hand with that. Wonderful. Overview of the key our view of the key stages then. Here's the bit that it's a unique place that primary teaching occupies. I think that's fabulously wonderful to see our work credited really carefully. It's a chance to consolidate and deepen understanding across a broad range of subjects. But when they begin to develop curiosity, enthusiasm and joy in learning, which can last a lifetime, amazing. My favourite phrase of the current national curriculum, it should inspire people curiosity to know more about the past. Well, it's still here, amazing, it's vital. Because if we want children to really engage with the world around them, we've got to give them the chance to develop that joy, that care, that enthusiasm. Developmentally appropriate and pedagogically rich. So we're not going back to just focusing on what the child wants to learn. But we do need to be aware of a 5-year-old is indeed 5. And therefore is the content going to engage them purposefully, but in a subject-specific and rich manner. To nobody's surprise, absolutely bang on the money. Whilst the Key Stage 1 and 2 curriculum is broad in scope, this can come at the expense of depth. You will often hear me speak about this if I do a training session or you listen to a webinar. From a history-specific manner, the reason it's so crammed full of content is because we as teachers put extra content there that doesn't need to be there. If your school is focusing entirely on 3 totally different history topics a year alongside 3 totally different geography topics across the year, the reason it's overcrammed is because you overcrammed it. A big theme from my perspective that's emerging out of these broad headlines but also the history specific part is depth matters. So for me, and this is of no surprise, it's start thinking about, does it need to be there, and do your children have sufficient time to truly get it? That, I think, is really key. Let's scroll down to page 47. Knowledge rich is staying, as I mentioned before. The crux, the reason I've highlighted this part, is this emphasises the building of a deep understanding of subject matter and concepts. That's why I said just a second ago, why do you have 3 totally different history units a year that are artificially structured towards half-term blocks? More time to get it and engage with it is my call to arms. That's what I want schools to really consider. Not because of this review, but it's nice that this perspective I've had for years has been supported and validated with here. When I work with schools, my approach is always, I don't know your children, I don't know your area, we need to do this together. Have you considered how an external person might view your curriculum? What can they work out? What would it say about your school's values, your ethos? That's something that I think it's always useful to reflect on, and it does come across here from my perspective. Diversity and inclusion, not a surprise to see it in, but I think it's really useful and important that it is brought to the fore to represent 21st century Britain, not the classicals, traditionalist view that some people espouse. Therefore, which histories are we teaching and why? That's something that comes across in the history specific section here, as you can see. In history, teachers called for clearer guidance to help them reflect the subject's inherent diversity without replacing core content. My response to people who espouse that traditionalist view of why are you teaching this over that, it's not one or the other. It's how do we mould them together to give as true a depiction of the history as it's possible to give. This one, wasn't expecting to see this, but I think it's a really valid point. Because all of the subjects are depicted as separate PDF files, it's very easy to kind of miss the opportunity to build on what the children have learned in previous history units, but also broader understanding of the world through geography, RE, etc. Because we want them to activate and use that background knowledge because it often provides that vital hinterland background that helps them to make sense of this period of humanity's past. So on to the history-specific elements. History is in a strong place. It's not a surprise to me. History is a popular subject, and we heard through the call for evidence that the history curriculum is broadly working well. I agree, other than the element I said before about you've put too much stuff in it that you didn't need to put in. But let's think about where next. So this, which is taken from Ofsted's previous subject report, Rich Encounters with the Past, an enhanced understanding of the discipline of history. How is the past studied by historians and others? How do they utilise what they found to construct claims, arguments and accounts? Once again, this is consistent that we've heard for the last couple of years, and I don't disagree with it. But in order to be able to do this in sufficient depth, we need to get rid of the superfluous. A curriculum to provide more space for exploring and embedding these disciplinary skills which are essential for further study. Agreed. The fact that history inherently forces us to think critically, weigh evidence which is taken from the national curriculum as it currently stands, is vital for life skills such as the new focus on things like AI, misinformation, disinformation. cannot agree more. But this requires to strip away that superfluous content. I apologise for keeping repeating this, but it is the crux. Programmes of study should update and enhance the requirements for disciplinary understanding without excessive content. To me, that makes it sound like we're going to get more clarity. So it's not going to be loads and loads of extra stuff we've got to shoehorn in. It's clarity over what it means and what it looks like here. The nature of the national curriculum for history itself is reflected here, which I think is really useful. Because it's not clear which elements need to be taught in lots of depth, because there's huge lists of non-statutory examples. So what they're saying here is greater clarity about coherence between statutory and non-statutory content. Which bits do we need to put in and spend time truly understanding, and which elements can be part of that sense of narrative overview? That's going to be clarified. Hooray, is all I can say on that. And last but not least, this part. This should be achieved by minor redrafting of content. What it means by minor redrafting of content, as I hoped for, as I've speculated since I read the interim report, we're not going to see huge change. There's going to be clarifications and a broader sense of this is how it can be done, is what I'm really hoping for and aiming for. These changes should not detract from the historical and chronological understanding that is currently required across curriculum topics, nor reduce the subject rigour. So this is about clarifying, this is about specifying, and this is about us thinking, where next? Honestly, I'm delighted with this final report from a history sense and a bit of a primary teacher sense, because I am still a practicing primary school teacher. Huge, amazing thanks and brilliant work to those people involved in its drafting. Thank you so much to everybody that submitted in the call for evidence. Although we don't know exactly what these changes and thoughts are going to look like in terms of next steps, I am absolutely full of hope. I'm absolutely full of a bit of excitement that I think they've understood. But my kind of closing thoughts in terms of this probably quite rambling video, because it has been done in one take, is number one, how does your curriculum reflect your school community in terms of socioeconomics, demographics, values, ethos? Because if it's not, is it really as effective as it could be? And the big one that I've probably said 4 or 5 times now, because I am on my high horse about it, is why have you got so much extra content that you don't need? Because if we're going to say the curriculum is overstuffed, we kind of need to take a bit of responsibility that upon sometimes we've overstuffed it. That to me is the big takeaway that I hope schools start to think about and go, why don't we do one short unit and one long unit in a year? One's a half term, the other is a term. You don't have to do it that way, but you might if you want to keep binding yourself by half-term gaps. Just a thought. I'd be really interested in other people's thoughts and feedback on this. Schools Week have done some sensational reporting on this, really quickly putting out high quality stuff that's well worth a read if you don't want to read the full 197-page document. Once I've had a chance to digest it and think about the full document, I will probably write more of an updated thoughts and ideas about it. Any thoughts? Very interested to see. See you later.